1 2 1 2. All right, so we are live and the stream is starting right now. Hopefully, technically, everything's working fine. If you are around, and you can use the chat by going through the video and opening it directly on YouTube. So if you click on the YouTube icon, you can get to the chat. In case you are watching it in the course platform, you won't be able to reply to my questions. It's up to you. You don't have to do that, but it might make it a little bit more interactive. So today I am going to focus on monsters, because Halloween is just coming up, so that's the topic of today's seminar, and it's going to be about illustration. Last time we've done more Photoshop and a bit of graphic design, creating a poster. I thought this time we are going to focus on this project, and we actually have this project in the illustration career path. So before I'm going to talk about the illustrations, we'll also review a couple of the projects that you submitted. So we have some fun characters, monsters that we can go through. But I just wanted to show you that if you haven't tried out working on these briefs, we have this one under the illustration career path, monster illustration, but there's other ones as well here. We really would love to see more work submitted. We have more and more pro members joining each week, and we don't see that much work submitted yet, and hopefully this is going to change in the future. But just as always, I would like to request from you guys to try to put some effort into doing some of these projects, because that way we can give you more feedback and you can improve your skills faster. So I can already see Dante is here. He is one of the regular ones being available for these live streams, which is brilliant. I'm glad you can join us today as well. And I'm going to give you a little bit feedback on your work, because we can see that you submitted a monster illustration. So even if you're not into illustration, and even if the monsters are not your thing, the techniques and the things that I'm going to talk about today can be applied for all kinds of things. So generally, how to create an appealing or how to add appeal to your designs is what I'm going to try to explain. And I'm going to do this with a live demonstration of sketching in Procreate. So there's a lot to cover, and without any further ado, I'm going to get started. So I will show very quickly the monster illustrations that we have from our pro members. So we have Dante's work here on the left, then we have Vivian's work in the middle, this green character, and then we have Lilia's work here on the right. So these three are really interesting and cool designs. I'm just going to make these a little bit smaller. So we started to use Milanote for organizing the submissions for me to be able to review them, but also we are giving you feedback sometimes on Milanote. So here's another example that I just wanted to point out for Susan, who worked on the magazine spread. We gave feedback, or Shumi gave this feedback using Milanote, where we went through and visually just picking out the things that needed refinement. So allow us know whether you prefer to get feedback like this, or you actually prefer to have just purely these live streams where we review the work. But I feel like this is quite a good reference, and we might be doing this more in the future. Shumi actually went ahead and even created a version of how we think this spread could work better. So I think that for someone starting out is a very useful feedback to actually get both the comments but also a suggestion of how it can be improved. And Susan actually took this on board, and then we can see that the refined version of her spread looks already much better. So the first one was a little bit cluttered in general, and there were a couple of unnecessary elements, but here we can see below version 2 and another page in version 2 looks already much neater and more organized. So there's other submissions that I can show you just very briefly. There's a movie poster, which is quite fun, and then we have also this gin label, which I haven't reviewed yet, but because there's so much to cover today, I might come back to these, but most likely we will review them when we get to projects like movie posters. When we start reviewing them, I'm going to come back to this project and talk a little bit more about it then. But in general, so this is Dustin's work. I really like the composition and especially the treatment on the type here at the bottom. I think it's really cool. Maybe the only thing is the effect applied, this cutout effect on the characters in the middle can be a little bit confusing, or I don't know, it's a little bit just disjointed from the rest of the more realistic details behind it. And also the illustrative detail on the top again is a completely different style. So it's merging these different styles sometimes can be again creating a disjointed final result. So it's good to try to somehow combine them together or keep them in the same general feel. So don't combine photorealistic details with illustrations, or even if you do them, try to keep them consistent. So that's just a quick review on this, but I'm going to come back to that later. And also with the magazine spread, I can talk a little bit more about it later. But as I said, I'm going to focus on the monster illustrations. And I can see Dante saying that he was also using Procreate for the illustration he did, which is here on the left. And in general, this is probably... all three of these are really cool and unique concepts. Probably Vivian's design is the cleanest, and I think that is mainly because there's no background, first of all, but also it has a very clear silhouette, and I can immediately see that this is an alien, like a scientist alien. That's a very quick read, I can tell immediately. And the character has a really funny, bored expression, which also reads immediately. So the only disadvantage or downside to this character, is that the actual posture or the pose is really static. And this is a common mistake when you start out drawing, that you concentrate on the shapes, but you don't create a flow in your character, so you don't make it dynamic enough. And this is really difficult. Even I struggle with this a lot. The best way to get around this is to create several sketches and explore your character. So with your first sketch, you most likely are going to create a very static version, but then once you have the proportions and the general feel of a character, you can then take it further and maybe put it into action, make the character act out something or do something, because then once you know the character, almost like how illustrators would work, or even in concept art, they would create a T pose where the character is just standing straight, but then it's put into action. That's when it becomes more interesting. So what I would suggest for Vivian would be to instead of refining an illustration like this, this could have been just a simple sketch, and then create a couple of sketches with the same character, but act out something, add some more story to your character. And then once you find the most unique and fun action pose for your character, that's the one you should refine and illustrate. So this was a great practice, but I would love to see another example of the same character, maybe a further refinement of it, but mainly focusing on a more interesting and fun or quirky action that you put it into. The same applies to the other character from Lilia. This is again something that is a very interesting like cog monster concept, which I really like. But again, it's a little bit too static. It's just standing straight. Not much is going on apart from the wheel is turning and we can see it's moving somewhere. But in general, again, it's quite static. Now, Dante's work, on the other hand, here on the left, is interesting because it is more difficult to find out what this is actually about, like what the monster is doing. First of all, how to read this monster. So it's more dynamic in a way. We have a hat falling down here, or I'm not sure whether that hat is supposed to be part of the monster, but I feel like it's a head that is falling down. But then we have clearly a mouth and an eye here on the right, but then we have some details which is not obvious, like this, whether this is a tail with the little ribbon, and also what's that detail behind it. So it is a bit more like unique in a way, but my suggestion would be in this case is that even though you are trying to be very unique and different, you still have to make sure that your character reads clearly. So for it to be appealing and for it to people to be able to relate to, you have to have a good read on the character. So I'm going to show you a few examples here quickly, and just have Pinterest open, and I'm going to open on one of these examples. So we can see that like these characters here are all very appealing because we have a very quick, easy read on them. So it's mainly about the big eyes, the limbs and how they move and the poses that makes it easy to read them. But then we can go into more complex character illustrations as well. Like let's just say this one here. And even though this is much more complex and much more unique, you still have an appeal to it because of the colors being used, but also because of the contrast. So you can very clearly make out what's part of the character and what's not part of the character. So it's clearly holding those two mushrooms. It's not part of the character. While with Dante's illustration, I'm not 100% sure what's supposed to be part of this unique monster and what is an accessory on it. So I would recommend to think about these things whenever you are creating an illustration in general. And let's just pick another example where we can talk about this. Once again, here's another unique monster. It's something we can't really tell what it is, but we can again see, or most likely make out, what are accessories or details that are added on top of the character and what are actually part of the character. So even with these very unique designs, these almost like shaman type of characters, you can tell that it is wearing a mask, it is wearing all kinds of different things like holding that stuff, but we can clearly tell what's added on the character and where is the character underneath all of those details. So even when you are going with a wild imagination and creating something completely new and different, you still need to make sure that you create an appealing design. And it is a very hard thing and it takes a lot of practice. But the best thing to do is to always look at references and try to analyze the work from other artists. Okay, so I am going to jump back in here. And now that we've reviewed or went through some of these illustrations, I am going to jump into Procreate. So let me just keep Pinterest open. So we had Pinterest here somewhere. I'm just going to open it up. I think I closed it, but yeah, I have it open in another place. I'm just going to quickly have a look at the comments. Yeah, So yes, you're right that it's really like blended into the background. That's one of the things that you could definitely improve. But I'm going to show you a couple of things in this stream, and hopefully that will help with your work in the future. So by the way, congratulations for your second win on 99 Design. That is a brilliant news. We are so happy for you, and it shows that really like hard work pays off. So I am going to open or have my iPad, and I'm going to start working on some sketches. Now, last time as well, when we were working on the poster design, I used Procreate, and this is obviously not like a must. You don't have to use Procreate. You can do the same thing in Photoshop or Illustrator or whichever tool you prefer. Also on paper you can draw. It doesn't really matter. I just prefer to work with Procreate. It's just for me the trusty tool that I really do pretty much all of my sketching. Now I decided, because we are approaching Halloween, I wanted to do a very classical monster design, and I thought I'm going to do a ghost this time. Now ghosts are quite simple if you think about them. Like the actual silhouette is usually very simple, but I would like to demonstrate how much you can change a character even with these simple characters with a ghost, just simply by changing the eye, the posture, and concentrating on telling a story is what's going to be important. So you might remember that we also had a video, which is part of the monster drawing course, where I go through the 10 principles of a good character design. So I'm going to refer back to that a couple of times, but let's just start with a quick sketch. So whenever we think of ghosts, the first thing comes to mind is this typical shape of a cape. I'm just going to draw this again. Something like that is immediately what comes to mind. And then we have the eyes, and then we have the mouth. So that's just like a very quick example of a ghost. But immediately, if I start adding, for example, limbs here and arms in this case, we can make this a friendlier ghost by having maybe just a hand like that, almost like a Mickey Mouse type of hand. But if I make it more, if I want to make it more scary, I can start adding more like sharp, scary looking hands like this. So you can tell them immediately how that is going to change the final result. Now, if I were to draw this and I want to make it a little bit more interesting, I can also start playing around with the proportions of the expression and the details here. So you can see I made it quite big, the eyes and the mouth. But if I make it smaller, that might make the whole design a bit different. And also I can start playing with adding a bit more dynamism by moving it slightly further up here, something like that. And then with the arm as well, I can start adding a bit of design. So something like that. I'm sorry if sometimes I might stop talking because I have to concentrate on the details I'm adding, but you can already see that what I'm doing here is another very important aspect of character design and drawing in general, is to create these simple details which tells you what's in front and what's behind. So when you just draw lines, like in this case with the arm, when you just draw them like this, that doesn't really tell us any information about whether this arm is behind the body, so it's coming from behind, or it's in front. But as soon as I add a little line in here, just that tiny bit of detail immediately starts to define this arm coming from behind the main body of the ghost. So I am going to draw the other arm here on the other side, and let's just first draw the claws. Now, of course, it helps if you practice drawing hands in general. Something like that. There's the palm. And then now we just have to decide where this goes. Probably somewhere up there could work. Maybe we can rotate it around as well a bit. That's quite good. And then let's just draw this. Maybe we can draw it a bit further down. Okay, and notice already what I'm doing here. It might not read that well just yet, but notice what I'm doing already, adding that little overlap line there. So if that's not there, again, it doesn't read as well as having that detail added. So while here the body is in front of the arm, here in this case the arm is in front of the body, and even without me drawing this in here, just that subtle indication is already helping to make it better read. So I am going to just add a little bit more details just so I can also myself read this a bit better. And I'm going to keep an eye on the comments. I can see Robert is also here. I'm glad you guys are giving each other feedback. That's very important. And that's one of the things I would love to have in the future more of, both on the Facebook group and here on these streams, to have some inspiration from each other, and also especially feedback on each other's work. So you shouldn't just rely on my feedback. It should be mutual, and also you guys giving feedback on what I'm doing right here. So yeah, I'm really glad that you started to have that type of conversation. So keep on doing that while I'm working, and feel free to have any comments on what I'm doing here. So most important thing is that when I'm drawing, I am not committed to anything, and until I'm really happy about something. And this was again something very hard to learn, and it took me long practice, and I'm still practicing to get better at it. But for example, here in this case, I might be feeling like, oh, the expression is really cool, but the reason why I'm using a lower opacity is so I can then explore it further, and I can start experimenting with a different eye. Maybe this other eye is actually not even good. Where I placed it first, I might want to do it slightly differently. Maybe something like this could be better. Or if I want the mouth to be even more scary, I can have more sharp details on the top, not just on the bottom, and then come with it down, and then just add a bit more detail. But you see, I don't commit to things too quickly. We can have the eyes going further out, something like that. We can even have flaming eyes if we wanted to. Just going to keep it something like that. Now, also the same thing with the pose itself. I quite like the way the pose is coming together, but I am not happy with the general silhouette of this character. So I am going to just refine a little bit the details here. So what I mean about that is the body of the ghost. So I don't like this flat head that we had here. So instead, I'm going to try to create a bit more spooky design, and almost like have him wearing some kind of hat, something like that. Let's just keep adding a bit of detail here. Yeah, I think that already looks better. And notice what I've done there. Again, I draw very quickly, and I'm not thinking too much about my lines at this point. But what I'm doing is then going back and refining those lines. But once again, the most important thing here is that instead of just drawing lines and focusing on the silhouette, I'm already making conscious decisions of having things going behind details. So like here, notice the same thing I've done is to have that little line going slightly further, defining that this shape here is in front of the other one. So this here behind is going behind it. So even without any shading, I can already tell that that's the case. And here, if I just simply continue this line this way and just tidy up behind it, again, notice how that line defines that connection, or the way that, again, I'm creating depth, just as simply as that. Same thing here. There's the depth. If I change the depth and I want this line to come in front, I just have to do this. So very quick and easy, and I can test which one works better. I actually quite like this way of doing it. Yeah, I might actually keep it like this. And yeah, I don't want to connect those two lines, so I'm just going to keep that away. Something like that, I think, works quite well. And don't forget that it's good to, I'm going to just make this slightly bigger. It's good to see your work before you forget about just keep looking at the same thing for a long time. It's good to change the flip the whole canvas around. In Procreate, you can do this from the canvas, flip canvas horizontally. And whenever you look at it from the other angle, it's almost like looking at a new illustration. So it can really help to see it with a fresh eye. And that can help to spot mistakes. Like here, I feel like already that the eye can be improved a bit. This cable is getting in the way constantly. Let me just fix it a bit. I'm using the headset mic because when I'm drawing, I don't like the other microphone to get in the way. So hopefully the sound quality of this is good, similar to the other one. Okay, now the cable is not in the way anymore. I also just quickly look at the comments again. Cool. Yeah, Robert, about submitting work, we don't really decide ahead which project we are going to highlight in the streams. So feel free to submit whichever project you prefer. Submit your work, and then based on the submissions, we usually decide what we are going to do next. So there's no clear plan on that. And even if we don't review your work in a live stream in the next one, you might get a review in the future. So basically, we have at the moment 10 projects to work on. But by the way, we are also going to add the 365 days of creativity assignments into the Pro Lounge. So you will get an additional 12 assignments from that course. So it was available before, but it wasn't available to do in like for Pro members separately. So we are going to introduce those as well, so you get additional projects to work on. And we would like to give you as many options as possible, so you can then decide which one you are most interested in. So even if you can just do one project a month, that's great. Pick whichever you prefer, and then you will get feedback from us besides the live streams. Sometimes you might get a review within a week, maybe a little bit longer than that. And eventually you will also get your work reviewed on these live streams. So hopefully that makes sense. So let me just move on with the character. So at this point, I could continue drawing the same pose. But what I'm also trying to do is to add a little bit more interest to it and make it more dynamic. So what I'm trying to do is to create these lines with which I can decide on the actual proportions. And what I'm doing right now is trying to capture the movement. So make it look like this character is moving around. So I'm just going to delete into it and then try to decide where I want the actual shape to end. Okay. And sorry again if I'm quiet, but I'm concentrating right now. Okay, so I think that looks again better than before. Starting to have a little bit of twist in it, which again I can show because it's drapery. I can add the line here to indicate the fold, so it's folding around, and then I can also maybe add a little bit more curvature here on that side, and then have another fold showing behind it, so almost like as if it's turning back. Yeah, something like that. And then I want to capture that it's moving. So here, all of these little details are turning a little bit towards the right. So there's that movement. And I think what I'm going to also show is the back of the monster. So just adding these little shaded details here for now, you will already see the depth behind it. Okay, so the same thing goes with the mouth. If I add depth right here, then we can already see that. And also on the eyes, we want to have darkness there. Now, I'm still not adding too much detail, so I'm very careful about focusing on details, because that's not important at this stage. It's all about the expression at this stage. So getting the expression right. And if we were to rewind this, I'm going to show you in the time lapse very quickly after I sorted out the hand a bit. Yeah. So if I were to show you and rewind a little bit already now, it would be interesting to see where we started off. So we started off with a very simple character. So we were there, and now refinement after refinement, we are getting already to a much more interesting result. But it all starts from a simple concept. So it doesn't have to be more complicated than this. I can just go back here and stop it at that point. So you can see that's like the most simplest design you can think of a ghost. And I didn't actually change much. I just refined it and went further with the whole concept. Now at this point, I would keep going back and forth, again, flipping the canvas. So let's flip the canvas back and keep checking whether I'm still happy with it or not. I'm going to probably move this hand a little bit further away from the body. I feel like it's going to help to make it read better. Okay. Yeah, I feel like that's slightly better. And then also the fingers can be a little bit more moved apart. Even this one maybe can be higher up. And then this thumb here is a little bit too boring, so I'm just going to make it into slightly more interesting, like that. This one and this one we can fix. Let's just move this out. And then the other one. I've got a cold, by the way. That's why my voice is a bit off today. Hopefully you can still understand me. I'll try to speak clearly whenever I can't speak. It's hard to draw and speak at the same time. Once again, I'm going to flip the canvas. By the way, you can set up quick shortcuts for flipping the canvas. I think what I have to do, what was that shortcut? Oh yeah, if you just tap on the center, I don't know why it's coming up here, but flip vertically, flip horizontally. It's somewhere in the settings, I can't remember. I think under preferences you can find these additional shortcuts somewhere. I think under help, and then advanced settings. No, that's not there. I can't remember where it is now. Somewhere it has to be here. But yeah, there's additional shortcuts that you can customize just by tapping on this this little circle in the between the brush size and the brush opacity is what you tap, and then the quick actions come up and you can very quickly flip the canvas. So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm going to continue drawing. All right, so let's see. I wanted to make this a bit more interesting. That one, and so we are working with 4 fingers. Maybe this one can be a bit more that way. It's a bit weird. Let's draw this. Move it behind it. Yeah, that's quite nice. So that finger can move behind. This one comes in front. Okay. So in general, that is getting closer to what I wanted. Now, at this point, I am still not 100% sure whether we have the right pose. So I'm going to select this bottom detail here. I'm going to test it. If I move it further up, how it looks, or if I turn it even further out, so exaggerating this pose, I think that could work even better. Yes, something like that. So see, before and after, even though it didn't feel static, you can still add a lot of more interest by just testing things out like this. So before and after, before and after. I feel like this will be even more interesting. So we can just very quickly sketch this out and create the shape that we needed. Now, also interesting, if you use very curvy details like this, by the way, you can hold down, keep drawing something, and then if you hold it down, Procreate turns it to this shape that you can then adjust. That's what I've just done there as well. So instead of having my wonky line, if I wait a bit, I can then adjust it and set up the curve the way I want it. Same with straight lines. So if I draw a straight line, if I wait a bit, it becomes like a nice clean line. But what I'm going to do here, I just wanted to show you that if I use a curve, that can create a nice round shape, which works well, especially if you have in contrast these more sharp shapes like the eyes, pretty much the hands, and even the hat that this ghost is wearing are quite angular and sharp. It might be nice to have that contrasting with this round belly, but if I want to make it a little bit more interesting or like abstract in a way, we could add actually sharp lines here. So let's see how it looks. If we have a sharp line there and then another sharp line, maybe even 2. So a bit more angular design could also work. Now, it's completely up to you what you prefer. Like again, these can be rounded down a bit, but generally you can have it a bit more angular. I feel like probably a rounder version would work better in this case. It just looks more natural. So I'm going to stay with that. Let's just make this side a bit smaller. And then, yeah, something like that. But let's just try this exaggeration here as well. We pull it out further and then pull it back. Yeah, that's not bad. Okay, you will see me keeps changing these things around, so I'm not settled on anything at this point. That's the most important thing to learn, to be able to keep making changes. Like with the eye as well, I can still move it around, decide whether I want it further out, make it bigger, maybe angle it down. And at this point, I also would like to show you that if I want to experiment with different details, like the eyes are very important. So whenever you work on the eyes, that even at this very simplified illustration level makes a huge difference. So if I zoom closer and I'm going to select the eyes and cut and paste it onto a separate layer, I can turn that off and create another layer on which I can draw eyes, new eyes. So for example, if we do eyes like this, you can immediately tell how much the character has changed by doing that. Now if I make them maybe round and further out, that again is going to change it a lot. I can make this one slightly bigger than the other one because that's closer to us. But you can see how immediately the whole character is starting to change. Let's try to make it smaller and in the middle, maybe a bit further. Where is this mouth? If I select this mouth, I can and we are on the wrong layer, yes. Can just drag it, distort it. Yeah. Something like that, and then let's draw again the eyes. So you can see it just by changing the eyes, there's a huge difference between this and that. And let's just adjust this now as well a bit. Yeah. So I am just keep adjusting the eyes and the mouth. As I said, these are the most important details of your character, apart from obviously the silhouette and the posture. So you really have to get the expression right. I'm just going to merge this down. I actually like this original eyes. I'm going to delete the other one. I just wanted to show it to you that it's very important to think about it. So I feel like the mouth is something that we can still work on a bit. So if I just select that, I want to just distort it down a bit, narrow it down, also move it up. Yes, something like that. Again, before and after. Now, what I'm also doing while I'm doing this, the changes that I'm making, I'm trying to explain it to you, is that I'm trying to think about the general form. So I try to imagine this character in 3D space. So the way I created the eyes and the mouth already shows the form that I'm imagining. So look at this. I'm just going to draw these lines in very quickly. So while I'm drawing, I am imagining this in 3D. So having this shape here might help you to see the way I see this. So I think of these lines, and also I could draw almost like a mesh on this character. And once you see that mesh, it helps to understand why I'm trying to create these type of curves on the silhouette and also on the eyes. So without the mesh, obviously, you don't really see what I'm doing or what I'm thinking about. But this is something that you can train your mind and your eyes to get used to. Whenever you are defining a form in space, for it to be more believable and more interesting, you always have to think in 3D. So you have to imagine like you are sculpting something from clay. So it has to have depth and perspective. So that's exactly what's happening here. I'm going to make things slightly darker around here. I can even use the smudge tool, smudge these details around. Yeah, something like that. Make this detail slightly darker as well. And then it's starting to come together. Maybe we can delete into it here a bit. Yeah, I think that's quite nice. And then I can refine. The eraser is just as important tool as the brush. So that's something you can learn. Just notice how by deleting that little detail there, I added a lot of expression. So it's not always the brush that you need to rely on. You can also use the eraser, and you basically draw and add detail with the eraser. And also, of course, you can refine a lot of things with it. But even here, I can use the eraser to go into these details and refine them, but also add some more additional expression that wasn't there before. So I feel like it's getting to a quite good detail level. I'm going to work a little bit more on the expression here, and of course we can decide how detailed we want this to be. Yeah, something like that. We can also add some more detail around here. Again, just creases, but also it adds a lot of expression. At the bottom, I don't think we need too much. Yeah, something like that. This can be angled down a bit. Yep. Cool. All right. So I feel like it's getting to a quite good level now. Also notice that I'm jumping back and forth between details. That's also common. So you shouldn't like linger too much in one part of your illustration. Just changed again one of the fingers here to create it in a more interesting shape or interesting angle. Same thing here. For this again, I'm trying to imagine the whole thing in 3D. That's what's happening here, and that's how I can start to make it more interesting. Before I go any further, I just wanted to have a quick look at the comments. Cool. All right. I can see you guys are liking this, enjoying this. So that's very good. All right. So we pretty much have the general shape ready. And at this point, I would say what I would do is to find the right angle for it. So if we turn it to the left, it feels unbalanced. If we keep it here, it feels quite good in balance, but we can then turn it a little bit even further to the right, so it feels like it's more movement going in this direction. So once again, even as simple things as rotating your design might make changes to how it's perceived. Actually, I feel like this original angle was quite good already, but it doesn't really make much difference. I quite like the way it is like this. Yeah, I feel like I'm going to keep it like that. All right, so this would be one sketch. Now, because I was talking, it took me much longer than normally. This state I normally reach in 15 minutes, more or less. So I am going to put this here on the left side. And before we go any further, to be honest, there won't be much time left to do more of these. But I wanted to show you that before I would normally continue refining this illustration, whether in Illustrator or here in Procreate, I would definitely make a couple of additional sketches. So this was just the first initial idea, and I already tried to make it dynamic, but I would continue exploring this before I refine it and before I commit to this one version. So I'm just going to do another layer and just very quickly do another illustration here. So I'm just going to think of something else. So what I'm doing now is trying to create a very different design, just to show you how many variation you can get. And also how much things you might miss out on if you concentrate on one specific design. Okay, so we have another ghost coming along here on the right. Now this ghost, I want to have very long spooky eyes like these, and it might not even have a mouth. Instead, it just has indication of arms. Again, you don't see the arms. It's just something indicated by the drapery. Once again, see what I've done there. I deleted this line, delete that line, and then draw another line here to show that that is in front and this is behind. And that already helps to define it a bit better, add some depth to it. Something like that. And then I want to get the general shape even more interesting. So what I will do is have it standing. Make it look like it's actually standing. I had that already in the previous sketch, but I want to make it even more interesting. So you can see how the drapery is actually on the ground here. So I'm indicating that it's standing on the ground, so it's not floating around. Again, different from the previous version. But I also want to create a very unique stance. So it's a little bit hunched stance, something like that. And I'm just not happy with the head. Maybe if we create something. No, I'm still not liking that. I want to create something different from the previous one, so I'm trying to explore maybe in the if it comes in the front. Yeah, that might be cool. Yeah, it looks almost like a cucumber ghost. So I might just change the hands completely. Yeah, I'm not sure about this design here on the top. I would just change the head as well a bit. And never forget exaggeration. So if we make this that's weird. Too much detail there on the side. Too sharp. Not sure about the head in this case. But all I'm trying to get to here is, again, like a completely different design. So I can have these. Maybe have some almost like, again, we don't see the detail, Yeah, I think that will work. We don't see the detail because it's under these drapes, but make it look like there are horns under the drape. So horns or ears. Again, we don't know 100% what we see because it's under these drapes, but it very much looks like horns. So that's again adds an added level of uniqueness, interest. We're trying to figure out what we are seeing, and that could work in this case. So I'm just going to add a bit more detail on the eyes, and then I feel like the hands can be a little bit more expressive. So I'm just going to move it out on that end. And then this one again can be a little bit further to the right. I could even have the arms to the side. And we can have a little bit, almost like a thinking pose. Like this. And then if I select the eyes, and we move the eyes in the middle, slightly, starts to read a little bit better. What about that? And then we can have a bit of negative space here, so we can see the body. Again, notice how I'm adding the lines, describing what's in front, what's behind. And the negative space between the arms and the body. I think this one can go a little bit higher. Something like that. And then if I like this design, I can then very quickly amend additional things like, I don't know, maybe this horn here in the back can be refined further. Yep, on this side again can be refined. And then if I want, I can also use the distort option and start to create more radical distortions, like even using the warp tool. I can start moving details around, so the proportions of details, and start to add a bit more interest to this character. Drag it out at the bottom, drag it in on the head. Yeah, something like that. Okay, and then I'm just going to very quickly get this hand fixed, since I moved it around quite a lot. Okay, there you go. So, I mean, this is where everything comes together. Once you start figuring out the shape that is interesting, you have to find an interesting pose for it. You have to make sure the expression is right. Like these eyes might not work. Maybe we can use the same eyes. So we are not restricted to use new details. If there was something that we liked in the previous design, why not use it again? So we can use the same spooky ghost design here. But if we want to try a new one out, why not explore and add some different design? We can even have the face further down. Why not? Can have the face somewhere around in the middle, or have the eyes really high up. That can also be interesting. So we can really be free exploring all kinds of different ideas. Can have big round eyes, or we can have the long ones as we tried earlier on. So it's really up to you what you want to create with your character. I'm just going to keep it at that. So all I wanted to get to with this is that you shouldn't restrict yourself to your original first concept. You should explore and at least create, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, even 10 different characters in this very basic shape, and don't commit to it until you are 100% that that's the best version that you can create. Now, you might think that you constantly will be giving up on designs, but and that's in a way that is true, but you're not actually giving up on them. You are trying to come up with different characters and different variations on the same concept. So I would just line them up next to each other, and I might end up using multiple versions and refine multiple versions of them. So it's not about giving up on your initial idea, it's about exploring and expanding the possibilities that you have. So hopefully this made sense, and I try to show you my approach. And of course, I am not a professional illustrator, so there's people much better than me doing these type of things. I can recommend someone I really admire and who is amazing at drawing monsters in general is Genndy Tartakovsky, who is the director and creator of many cartoons like Samurai Jack, now most recently Primal, which is a brilliant animation series. Highly recommend to check it out if you haven't seen it already. But he also directed the Hotel Transylvania series of animation films, and Dexter's Laboratory, and other amazing work that he's done. There's actually a couple of videos on YouTube where you can find about him where he's showing his process, and he would be very similar in the way he's working, but obviously he has a lot of experience in doing this, and his characters are very emotive and very expressive. So he's brilliant at giving action and interest to characters. So highly recommend to check his work out. I just show you right it here so you can see it. Genndy Tartakovsky, that's him. So yeah, highly recommend to check his work out. And you can learn a lot about characters if you study animation. So if you just analyze cartoons and animation films, it can help you a lot in understanding what makes a character work well, because in most cases characters that you design will probably end up being used in all kinds of different media, and it might actually be used for animation. So if you know that it is going to be animated, it's important to make sure that it works well for animation. So it has the limbs and it has good, easy to animate expressions or details that can be animated. So it's also worth keeping that in mind. But of course, not every character design would end up being used for animation. Cool. All right. So I'm glad you guys could join me today. Thanks, Robert and Danta, for joining me. And I try to keep an eye on your comments, so I'm glad you like it, what we went through today. For those who are going to watch the recorded version, don't forget that this project is active, so it doesn't matter when you are doing it. It doesn't have to be Halloween. Whenever you feel like giving it a try and doing some monster illustrations, even if it's in a sketch state like these, you can already submit it. Don't feel like you need to give us a fully fledged refined illustration. We would love to see even sketches. Let's say you do 5 or 6 different sketches, submit that, and then we can give you feedback before you move on to the refined version. So that way, even if you have like 10 minutes, you can already do something that you can submit, and then we can give you some ideas how to move on. So I can see Sylvia is also here. That's great. Thank you all for joining the live version, the live stream, and then we are really looking forward to seeing more work from you. Use the Facebook group to ask any questions if you are unsure of how to move forward. And then so thanks again, guys, for everything, and best of luck. Have fun learning, and I will see you in the next one.